Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
And focused on certain topics and issues. This is our second day of deliberation. The first session is on political and economic system of Islam. Yesterday, Dr. Israr explained to you that Islam is not just a spiritual tradition. Spiritual tradition in the sense of personal piety, rather it comprehends the socio-political order. It's a civilization. It is a complete way of life. And today he will elaborate on the political and economic system of Islam. I request Dr. Israr to present his ideas.
Ahmaduhu wa usalli ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'du fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qala Allahu tabaraka wa ta'ala kama warada fi surati Yusuf. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الحكم إلا لله وقال تبارك وتعالى كما ورد في سورة الشورى وأمرهم شورى بينهم صدق الله العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I praise Allah and send my blessings to Muhammad, his messenger, rather the last messenger. And I take refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. And I begin with the name of Allah, who is compassionate, merciful. Then I have quoted two ayat from Quran. I will refer to them later on in my discourse. As you know, I have to speak, but I can't elaborate, as the brother said, because we have only 1 hour at our disposal. I can only give you a sketch, brief sketch, of the political and economic system of Islam, starting with the Islamic polity. The first point I want to make is that Islamic state or Islamic polity is not democracy, nor it is theocracy, nor it is aristocracy, nor it is dictatorship, nor it is monarchy. None of these terms suits with Islam. But if we want to use these terms, because we know the connotations of these terms, and because we have to be brief, Islamic polity is theo-democracy. Two elements have been joined together. Now, democracy is based on popular sovereignty. Sovereignty of Islam belongs to God, not to any person, any king, any sovereign, any emperor, or to the whole humanity. It is one of the biggest sins in Islam to associate anyone as partner in the sovereignty of God. It is shirk. And this shirk in Islam is unpardonable. It is unique. And that is why, first of all, I quoted the ayah from Surah Yusuf. It is Surah number 12 and ayah number 40. إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. Sovereignty belongs to Allah alone. There is no sovereign, no ruler, No lawgiver except Allah. And this subject has been repeated in the Quran so many times. We find in Surah Bani Israel, Surah 17, Ayah 111. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ فِي الْمُلْكِ. There has been no partner with him in sovereignty. He is the king. He is the ruler. And we find in the next surah, Surah 26, Surah Al-Kahf, Ayah 26, وَلَا يُشْرِكُ فِي حُكْمِهِ أَحَدًا. He is not ready to accept any partner in his sovereignty. At so many places we find the word Al-Malik, the king, for Allah. In the beginning of Surah Al-Jumu'ah, in the end of Surah Al-Hashr, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, As-Salam, Al-Mu'min. 8 names of Allah in rapid sequence in one ayah of Quran. 8 names. But the first one is Al-Malik. He is the king, he is the sovereign. So here we rule out democracy. Democracy based on popular sovereignty, sovereignty of the people. But theocracy, what does it mean? Rule of some clergy or some caste, as in Hindus, Brahmanism. There is no Brahmanism in Islam. There is no rule by clergy in Islam. No pope. So this is not theocracy. I need not go into detail, dictatorship or aristocracy. None of them fits in. Now, what is the relationship of the theo element and the demo element of this theo democracy? Let me mention here, this term was coined by Maulana Maududi. The credit should go to him, and I agree with him. Yes, theo democracy. The theo element are the injunctions of the Quran and the Sunnah. No person, no class, no clergy. And the demo element is the shura, the mutual consultation about those things in which we don't have any clear injunction of the Quran and the Sunnah. Let me explain it with an example. And here I am referring to a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Masalul mu'mini ka masalil farasi fi aqiyatihi. Mu'min, believers, they are like a horse tied to a peg. A believer is not free to do whatever he likes. He is a bondsman to Allah. He believes in Allah, so he has to accept His commandments. He is bound by them. He believes in the Prophet, so he has to follow the example of the Prophet. Another binding. He believes in Quran, so he has to obey the injunctions of the Quran. So he is like a horse tied to a peg. Now I extend this simile. If we have an open ground and we want that the horse should also run and move, if we can tie this horse with this peg with a rope 200 yards long, a circle with a radius of 200 yards come into existence. In this circle, the horse is free to move to the east, to move to the west, to move to the north, to move to the south. To 50 yards, to 100 yards, to 150 yards, to 200 yards. But not an inch beyond the 200 yards. Can't go. Tied up. Now, in this example, this circle represents the injunctions of the Quran and the tradition of the Prophet. We can't go beyond this. But within this circle we are free. And Quran says it is amruhum. Allah has left this circle for the people to decide. And there they can decide by mutual consultation. Amruhum shura bainahum. The matter that Allah has left for you to decide, you can have mutual consultation. And you can make decision by counting of votes, no harm. For example, if you have to hold a reception at your house, what drink is to be served? No alcohol. No, that is beyond that circle. But any beverage, any syrup, you can serve and you can decide by counting the votes which one is to be served. So this is the demo element, democracy. Here nobody holds the authoritative position that I will say whatever I say you have to do. No, nobody. This is amruhum. This is the matter left by Allah for the community. They will decide it. So in this way, Islamic polity, Islamic state is a combination. Within this circle, you can establish the best norms of democracy, best norms of democracy. We can say it's limited democracy. But limited not by any person, not by any human being, not by any class of people, not by any nation over any other nation. Limited only by the injunctions of the Quran and the tradition of the Messenger of Allah. Now, I come to the second point. If sovereignty belongs to God, what remains for the mankind? That is called khilafah, vicegerency. Allah created Adam according to the Quran as vicegerent on earth. Vicegerency, and what is the relationship between the sovereign and the viceroy or the vicegerent? We have our experience, and Brother Markham must be knowing it. We were subjects to the Britishers. The sovereign was there, the king or the queen of England. We had a viceroy in Delhi. What was the relationship? Whatever instructions are coming from His Majesty's government or Her Majesty's government, they have to be implemented as such. The viceroy can't change them. But where there is no clear instruction from His or Her Majesty's government, the viceroy has to look to the local conditions, use his best judgment. What would be in the best interest of the kingdom? And he can take a step. So this is the relationship of man with Allah. فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى. Whenever some guidance comes to you from me, you have to obey them. But wherever there is no clear injunction, it's your matter, you decide by mutual consultation, and you are a vicegerent of Allah. Now let me give you a brief history of this vicegerency. Till such time that the institution of prophethood was continuing, this vicegerency was personal. The prophet was the vicegerent of Allah, because he had the connection with the sovereign. The wahi, the revelation was coming to him. He was the recipient of the orders, divine orders, instructions from the sovereign. So it was a personal vicegerency. And let me give you an example about Dawood alayhi salam. Quran says, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard. O David, we have made you the vicegerent on earth. Till Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this institution of caliphate, vicegerency, was personal. Muhammad was Khalifa of Allah. Although this word is not used for Muhammad, his position that he was a messenger is so profound that no other position can be ascribed to him, but he was the Khalifa. Who was the ruler at Medina? And in his last days, who was the ruler over the Arabian Peninsula? Muhammad. He was getting instructions from Allah. But after the death of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the end of the chain of prophets and messengers, now this has become a collective institution. Just as monarchy, sovereignty of pharaoh, sovereignty of a king, and the divine rights of the kings, now it is popular sovereignty, not personal. Except for the king in England, only a token, maybe a decoration piece and nothing else. Same case in Japan. But sovereignty is to the people, collective. But for the first time in human history, this republican type of government, people having that authority, was the collective caliphate of the Muslims. Now the caliph, the viceroy, the vicegerent, was to be elected through mutual consultation. But I am talking about only the pious caliphate of Abu Bakr, Umar, Ali and Usman. Later on it turned into monarchy, kingship. Although that kingship was also bound by the laws of Allah, but now it was a dynasty going on. Whether they were the Umayyads or the Abbasids or the Ottomans, it was a dynasty. Not appointment of a caliph through popular consultation. Now this is the vicegerency. Now the third point is, we have to derive the fundamentals and the principles of Islamic State, a modern Islamic State, from the Quran, the tradition of the Prophet, the example of the pious caliphs. But exact replica of the pious caliphate cannot be established again in this world, due to three things. That period of pious caliphate was an appendix to the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Continuation. Number two, the purification of the selves of the companions that had been done and achieved by Muhammad was to such a level that we could never fear any selfishness, self-interest from those people who had been trained and purified by Muhammad. We can't expect this level of piety and selflessness now. Number three, that was a tribal society. For mutual consultation, there was no need of taking the opinion of every person. The chiefs of the tribes, the head of the families, if they consulted with each other, the object of consultation, mutual consultation, was fulfilled. That is not the case today. It's not a tribal society, mostly. Somewhere in the corners of the world there might be tribal system. We have it in our Balochistan and so on. But generally it has gone. So now we have to derive the principles of Islamic State from the example of the pious caliphate, the four caliphs, and fundamentals from Quran and Sunnah. But we have to take and borrow the institutions that have been developed by the West. What board of mutual consultation? You know, Abu Bakr said I am accountable before you. If I go wrong, you disobey me and correct me, rectify me. I am no dictator, I am no ruler, I am not infallible. I can commit an error and then you have to rectify me. But how to rectify? Who will rectify you? There was no institution. Just for example, the impeachment of the President of America, institution. There were no this type of institution over there. The same thing was said by Umar, radiallahu anhu. If I take the right path, you have to obey me. If I go on the wrong, you have to rectify me. What will you do then? A Bedouin stood up, he took out his sword. We shall rectify you with this. And he said, thank God that I am not leading the dumb people. Dumb or deaf, no. So, institutions we have to borrow from the West. Just as this light, not invented by a Muslim. We are using it. This loudspeaker, not invented by any Muslim. We are using it. In the same way, institutions we have to borrow. So we have to have three pillars of the state. Although they say that there is a fourth pillar also. We have to have a legislature. We have to have a legislature, an executive, and a judiciary with defined authorities, defined limits, defined checks and balances. Now, what is the scope of legislature? It's a very common misunderstanding that there is no scope of legislature in the modern Islamic state. Islamic law is already there. We have only to enforce it. No. The clear do's and don'ts from Quran, we have to abide by that, or from the Sunnah. But there's a vast area, very vast area of legislation about the foreign policy, about the form of government, whether it should be unitary or federal or confederal, whether it should be parliamentary, two house, or one house, parliamentary or presidential. These are all mubah, and please note, in Islamic law, the principle is not that only such things are permissible which can be proved to be permissible by Quran and Sunnah. No. Everything is permissible which cannot be proved to be forbidden according to the Quran and the Sunnah. So these two things are very different. Had the case been the former one, the legislative scope would have been very narrow. But here, everything is halal, permissible, unless it can be proved to be haram, forbidden, by the injunctions of the Quran and the Sunnah. So vast field, the taxation policy, what type of a government you want, what subjects you want, an authority you want to give to the provinces or the states, and what you want to retain for the center, etc., etc., etc. Wide scope. And now framing these laws now by the legislature is called ijtihad. Ijtihad, the root is the same as juhud, from which we derive jihad, to struggle, to strive. Ijtihad is to exert yourself to the utmost, to frame a law or rule about something which has appeared now, it was not present in the days of the Prophet. So you have to derive from Quran and Sunnah, and this inferring, deriving, so that you don't cross the limits of the Sharia, but within the limits of the Sharia, you are passing a new law. This is ijtihad. Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. This is the 5th surah, ayah 59. O you who believe or profess to believe, I am including Muslim and Mu'min both. O you believe, who you believe or all who profess to believe. Obey Allah, obey His Messenger. And people who hold authority amongst you, from among you, not Muslim. We are not allowed by Quran to obey non-Muslims, but we can be forced to slavery. We have been forced. But Quran doesn't allow us. Atiullah wa atiur Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. Those who hold authority from amongst you. So we have to see to Quran, to the tradition of the Prophet, and then the people who hold authority. At that time, the caliphs, and then the kings, and in the modern state, it will be the parliament. Now, ijtihad can be done by any scholar, any learned man, any alim, but whose ijtihad will be enforced as law. That will be decided by the parliament. And this is what Iqbal said in his lectures. Now ijtihad would be through parliament. It doesn't mean the parliament is sovereign to frame anything. It can make ijtihad within the limits of the Sharia. And then every citizen will have a right, if he thinks that any proposed piece of legislation has crossed the boundary of Sharia, he can knock the door of the judiciary. Parliament has transgressed its limits because in the constitution it has been laid down that sovereignty belongs to God and no legislation can be done repugnant to the Quran and the Sunnah. Let me have a chance to prove it in the court. Not any body of ulama, court, judiciary. And definitely in an Islamic state, the judges would be learned in Islamic law, Sharia. But it is not out of their belonging to some class of clergy, but the judiciary. They will decide. And if they come to the conclusion that yes, this piece of legislation has transgressed the limits of the Sharia, it will be null and void. But the matter will be referred back to the parliament. Frame new law. So now I have to make haste. What about the elections in Islamic State? Who will have the right to vote? What would be the age? Number one, it is adult suffrage. For every Muslim, he can vote. I missed one point. The caliphate, collective caliphate, is the caliphate of the Muslims, not of the non-Muslims. Someone who doesn't accept God as his Lord and his ruler, he forfeits his right of vicegerency. So Maulana Maududi used the term popular vicegerency, and here I disagree with him. It is not the popular vicegerency. Popular means all the people living in that state, irrespective of their religion, anything. No, this will be the caliphate of the Muslims, Khalifatul Muslimin. Just as the parliament members in the democracy, all the citizens are sovereign, but they delegate their sovereignty to the person whom they are voting for. And now those people are sitting in the parliament and exercising the right of sovereignty, framing laws. In the same way, every Muslim living in that Islamic state, by his vote, he delegates his vicegerency to the persons who are sitting in the shura or the parliament. But they will be Muslims only. This is the bitter thing. and very unpalatable for present civilization, the present Western civilization. I'm coming to that. So now election can be, by mutual consultation we can fix the age, but all Muslims, men and women, will have the right of vote. Age can be fixed by mutual consultation. Amruhum shura bainahum. And as regards the candidates who come forward, I think his age should be fixed at 40, at least. Because in one ayah, number 15 of Surah Al-Ahqaf, Allah Ta'ala has fixed the age of 40 for psychological maturity of human beings. And then he has to pass through screening. What is his character? In Islamic State and in the court, no Muslim can appear as a witness unless he is screened. What's your character? What your neighbors say about you? How have you accumulated this wealth? Can you justify? So very thorough screening of those who come forward to fight the election. This is the only distinction. Otherwise, all Muslim males and females are eligible to vote. Now coming to non-Muslims. Yesterday, more than one brother said that you have spoken frankly. So I have to be frank again. Non-Muslims in an Islamic state are not full citizens of that state, because this is an ideological state. It's not a nation state that people living in some geographical area, they are all equal citizens, irrespective of their faith, religion, creed, whatsoever. It is not the case with the Islamic State. Only who believe or profess to believe, only who are Muslims. I told yesterday that the basic of Islamic State and Islamic society is Islam, not Iman. Now, what are their rights? They are free to practice any religion, believe anything they like. One God, 100 gods, goddesses, gods. They are free to worship anything, any person, any deity they like. They will have their personal law absolutely independent and free. They will practice their own personal law. The places of their worship, I said yesterday also, will be protected more than the mosques. They are sacred. They will be free to do business, to enter services, and if they like, even army. But they are not bound for military service. All Muslims will be bound for that. Whenever they are required, it will be a people's army, just like China and Israel. People will be working, but they are all soldiers, and they are called, and they take the part in the defense of the country or whatsoever it is. They are free to preach their dogma, their religion, their beliefs to their people and their children and their next generation. They can have schools for them only, not the Muslims. They are not allowed to preach their religion to the Muslims. Here you have to note that because the basis of the state is religion, the basis and the foundation of the state can be eroded and corroded if this freedom is given. Now, only two places where the non-Muslims will not be able to participate. One is the legislature. It's very logical. That has to be based on Quran and Sunnah. And they neither believe in Quran, nor in the Sunnah, nor in the Prophet. So only Muslims can go there. The non-Muslims can have their own parliament, consultation body, to fight for their rights, to represent themselves. Oh, okay. But the legislature has to be of Muslims. Number two, the highest positions where the policy is framed of the state, non-Muslims will not be included there, because the basic policy of Islamic State is to propagate Islam throughout the world. Try to establish Islam as a political socio-economic system over the whole of the globe. That has to be the basic policy of an Islamic State. And it's clear that no non-Muslim will be contributing to this. So these are the only two places. Otherwise, they are free. And then they have to pay tax. Muslims will be paying zakat, an obligatory tax, obligatory charity, 2.5% of all your belongings. But a fixed jizya, we call it, and there is a very bad taste about this word jizya. It is from jaza, the reward, because Islamic State is providing them peace, tranquility, security, just like the concept of taxes. Why do people pay taxes? To make the government able to have peace there, security, defending the country. You need army, you need force. So non-Muslims will pay jizya or tax. And it is a poll tax on every individual. It will be forced. So now, I think I have covered the basic questions regarding Islamic polity. Now I turn to Islamic economic system. Here I have to be more brief. It's a very complicated subject. And I told you in the very beginning, I have not been a student of philosophy or student of economics. But because Quran claims that it is the guidance for whole mankind for all time to come till the end of this world, so it has touched and discussed all these aspects of human life. On that basis, I find myself, having a right to speak on these topics also. I will keep, two reference points. Capitalism and communism. Although communism, it is said it is dead, I think it can be resurrected. It was a reaction to capitalism, and now the capitalism is going much farther. And the reaction you saw in Seattle, in Davos, in Washington, this is the reaction to that global capitalism. If Islam doesn't come in this world, this communism in another form, another shape, socialism will come as a reaction. So now these two systems, they are the point of reference. And I don't need to go into details. Private ownership, not only of the articles of use, but also the means of production. A factory, a mill, a farm, anything. Here, on the other side, no private ownership. In the beginning, that was total negation, but then they allowed private ownership of the articles of use. You can own a small house, a bicycle, or a car, and so on, for use, not for production. What was the result? Positive result of capitalism. personal incentive to work harder. If I earn more, I possess more. Competition, better production, free market, no controls. Let the prices be determined by the demand and supply. If the demand is more, supply is less, prices will go high, let them go high. If the demand is more and supply is less, otherwise it can happen. The authority to hire and fire. So if you want to remain as an employee, you have to work. You have to work. So the production was more. On the other side, no personal incentive. You have to pay wages only, that's all. Why to work harder? Why to produce more? You will not possess more. You will be given the same fixed wage. So no improvement in the quality of production. Quantity, quality both remain back. And that was the fall of communism, the cause of the fall of communism. In the beginning there was an ideological fervor which sustained that economy. But this ideological fervor became diminished and diminished and diminished and diminished. So what happened? The area of wheat growing of Russia was far more than the area of America. But America was exporting wheat and Russia was importing it. But on the other side, the positive point of communism or socialism, not a very wide gap between the haves and the have-nots. There was difference. A foot constable or an ordinary soldier and the commander-in-chief, they couldn't be equal in their salaries. But they say that the most difference maximum was 1 to 30. That's all. And in that system, appalling gulf between the haves and the have-nots. But then, the capitalism had to make a correction. This gulf has to be kept in certain limits. If the poor are hungry, they will attack you, they will revolt. So give them subsistence level, unemployment, allowance, some sort of security, social security. Give them something. Otherwise they will revolt. I hear that they call it the internal management of capitalism. Now what is Islam? Maybe you are astonished to know, according to me, my study, Islam doesn't have one economic system, it has two. One economic system at the height of spirituality, deep faith and height of spirituality. The system is something else. At the legal level, at the common people level, the system is something else. There are 4 cardinal principles of Islamic economic system at the high spiritual level or the deep level of belief and iman. Number 1, nobody owns anything. Neither individuals, nor the nation, nor the state. Ownership is for Allah. Just as in the political system, we said, ruler is Allah. Sovereignty belongs to Him and Him alone. In the same way, Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. You don't own anything. Ownership belongs to Allah. You are only custodians. Parallel to caliphate. These are custodians. You don't own even your body. You have to be caliph of Allah on your body also, to enforce the divine law on your own person, in your own home. In the same way, ownership belongs to Allah. Nobody owns anything. Number two, whatever you earn, maybe through agriculture, maybe through business, maybe through industry, or service somewhere in the offices, etc., etc. Whatever you get is not your earning. It is the bounty of Allah. You know, if you have hired a person for working as a laborer, and you say, I will pay you $20 in the evening. You have to work for 8 hours here. Now, if you find that the person has worked very hard, in a very responsible way, he didn't need any supervision to work. He was working out of his own responsibility. So in the evening, you give him $20 plus 5 more. This is fadl. He couldn't demand it. It is not his earning. He could demand only $20. The extra 5 are fadl in the terminology of Quran. Surplus. So whatever you get in this world is fadl of Allah, not your earning. The word of earning is Quran uses for whether you are earning virtues, good deeds for the reward in the hereafter, or you are earning bad deeds resulting in punishment in the hereafter. These are the earnings. Laha ma kasabat wa alayha maktasabat. Qasm, to earn, mostly, except only in one place in Quran that is used for earning also. Earning materially. Now the first principle, nobody owns anything, neither individuals nor the state. Everything belongs to God. Whatever you get in this world is the bounty of Allah, not the result of your labor. Number 3, out of this which you have been given, your right is only limited to your needs. Whatever is surplus from your needs is the right of the poor, people who have remained behind financially. Or you may say, it is for Allah. Give it away. It's not yours. Allah has put it in your wealth to test you, whether you keep it for yourself or you give it to the people whose right it is, not yours. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ قُلِ الْعَفْوَ. When there was, instruction and persuasion, spend for the cause of Allah, spend for the pleasure of Allah, spend and spend and spend and spend 1,000 times. People asked, what is the limit? How much? يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. How much we have to spend for the pleasure of Allah? Answer was, قُلِ الْعَفْوَ. Whatever is spare, whatever is more than your needs, whatever is surplus, give it up. Don't keep it with you. This is the right of the deprived people. These 4 cardinal principles go to make a complete economic system. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he lived at this level, never accumulated any wealth, no penny to be retained. And there were a number of his companions whom we call fuqara sahaba, Abu Zar, Abu Darda. They were living at this level. And after that pious caliphate, the Muslim saints, whom we call Sufiya, they lived at this level. And in a Muslim society, although these people will be in a very minute minority, but they are the pacemakers. Who is to be honored? Who is to be respected? The wealthy man or this person who owns nothing, who retains no wealth? He is to be honored. He is to be respected. So moral values, the pacemaking of these moral values is done by these people who are living their life at this level of economic system. But this is absolutely voluntary, not forced. There is no fixed level that this is your requirement and this is not your requirement. You have to fix it yourself. The more you believe in the hereafter, the more you will tighten your belt and spend more for the pleasure of Allah, so that you get the reward in the hereafter. To give you an example of the teaching, how the Prophet used to teach his people, a goat was sacrificed in the house of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, the wife of the Prophet. All the meat was distributed among those poor people, the Ashabu Suffa. There were people, who were sitting in the mosque only to learn from the Prophet, doing nothing, no business, no labor. So it was distributed. She only kept one shoulder, because this meat of the shoulder was liked by the Prophet. He retained. When the Prophet came, he asked, what remained of that goat? He answered, nothing but a shoulder. He said, no, whole of the goat has been saved, except this shoulder which we will consume. What we have given, it is saved forever. Just as Jesus said, don't collect in this world where there is fear of theft, where things, are destroyed. Why not gather everything in the hereafter? There's not going to be any theft there, no loss. Why do you deposit in the banks over here? Why not deposit in the divine bank of the hereafter? So this is voluntary. And that is the beauty of it. Not forced. It's not legal. Legal things are forced. Now I come to the second legal system, legal economic system of Islam. It is controlled and internally managed capitalism. Private ownership is allowed. You can have a shop, you can have a factory, you can have a farm. In a limited sense, it is your property, but it is actually its divine trust with you, sacred trust. With this principle, all those things of capitalism come there to play, which was not there in communism. Personal ownership, personal incentive, competition, try to improve your product. You have to compete in the market. Try to lessen the price. You have to compete in the market. all these cardinal principles of capitalism, by virtue of which capitalism triumphed and succeeded, and Fukuyama boasted, this is the end of history. It is proved that this system of ours, based on liberal democracy and capitalistic economy, is the best. There is no rival. Man has reached the pinnacle, the climax. There is nothing else who can come and confront our system. But Islam has done two master strokes by which capital will play a role in the economy, but it will not go beyond certain limits to become an overall controller of the economy. Chaining this genie of capital. H.G. Wells has mentioned in his part, in the short history of the world on Roman Empire, that the concept of currency came only in the Roman Empire for the first time. And man didn't know what type of, chains he has attached it to himself and bound by those chains through this currency. Before that, it was all barter system. One is working in the field, he has grown wheat. Other one is sitting, and weaving cloth. You exchange the cloth for the wheat, that's all. There can be no hoarding. There can be no manipulating of the market. Nothing. Simple. But when currency came, this much of gold is equal to so many mounds, kilograms, 1,000 kilograms of wheat. This much. Or this much gold is equal to 1,000 yards of this cloth. Now this is the key. You keep that gold in your, and then you can manipulate. Price is going high, price is coming low. So Islam has changed this genie of capital so that it should come in the field and play its role, but not overshadow the whole of economy. Number one, no interest whatsoever. Earning has three elements: labor, capital, and then chance also. The same amount of labor and capital earns some amount of profit at one time, and the same amount of labor and capital may earn different amount at different time. But in principle, capital earning capital, haram. Except a few cases I will let you know. Basic proposition is, capital with labor, this is the rightful earning. Only capital being an earning agent. This is interest, this is usury. Both declared haram. It was haram according to Judaic law also, as far as I know. And it is haram in the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the exceptions are only, if you build a house, you can rent it out. Here also you are not working, but you are earning due to your capital. But this capital is fixed. If you give 10 million pounds or dollars to a person who is working, maybe he earns and it becomes 15 millions. Maybe he loses and he has now only 8 million with him. So that is different and this is different. Here it is a stationary, solid form of capital. It is not going to increase or decrease that way. Because you have lived here for 1 month, you have to give some reward for that. This is permissible. Ijara. In the same way, if somebody has some capital, some money, but he cannot do any business himself, either he is sick or ill or old, or he doesn't have that faculty, he gives this money to anybody. You do the business. This is called muzarabah in Islam. But in this proposition, if there is a loss, it will be borne by the man who possesses the capital, not by the worker. If there is some gain, then it can be shared. The risk is to the capital, not to the labor. Another form could be, and that is the normal form, you join together and you pool your money, your capital, and you are doing business, okay. But you give your money to someone, he is working, and you say, I don't know whether you gain or you lose. I must get the pound of my flesh, I have to get it, the pound of the flesh. I have to have 10%, 15%, 16%. That is my right. You might have lost, you might have gained. There are other means also by which Islam has chained this capital, this jinni of capital. There should be investment, there should be working with the capital, but not on interest. And interest of both types, usually as well as business and commercial interest, yes. Number 2, gambling, forbidden. Here you earn or lose only due to chance. No. Earn by labor. And this thing now, as you know, has become the greatest thing in the whole world. Speculation, taking the market up and drowning it to the bottom. The capitalist can play due to this speculation. Then there can be no trading. Either cash, give the price, take the material. Or if it is for future, you have to pay the total value in the first instance. By salam it is called. If you have made an agreement that in next wheat season, you will provide me 1,000 mounds or 1,000 kilograms of wheat at this rate. Now calculate the total value and give the total value now. Then only you are entitled to get those 1,000 kilograms of wheat at that time. Not after paying 10% or 5% or 10% and then the deal is done. No. By this, I will again use the word master stroke. Over trading is stopped. You do the trading within your limits, whatever capital you have. Over trading. The capital going far out. So these are some of the measures. The most important, riba. There is nothing more haram and more forbidden and more disliked in Islam than interest. Allah says, if you don't give it up, then listen. There is an ultimatum from Allah and His Messenger against you. Allah will go to war against you. In the belief, shirk, to assign some partner to Allah. And in actions, this riba, interest, the worst things. according to the Islamic Sharia. Now, what is the internal management? Institution of zakah. And here is a fixed line. If you own 7 tolas, I think it will become 3 or 4 ounces. If somebody can correct me. You are above this line. This poverty line, had been fixed. 52 tolas of silver, 7 tolas of gold. If you have, you are a donor. If you don't have, you are a recipient. This zakat is to be taken from you legally, forcibly. And the first caliph of Islam, Abu Bakr, fought against those people who refused to pay this zakah. That is one of the pillars of Islam. I talked about the pillars of Islam yesterday. The Shahada, the 5 prayers, the zakah, obligatory charity, and the Sawm, fasting, and Hajj. This is one of the pillars. Although he was advised, don't declare war against them. We are going to war against those people who have claimed the false prophets, who have stood up and we are also prophets. And also, the war started with the Romans. So don't open a third front. He said, no, I have to do it. So this zakah, tukhadhu min aghniyaihim wa turaddu ila fuqaraihim. It is taken, extracted out of the rich, and the rich are those who are above this line. And they are returned and given to those who are poor. But the poor is not the one who has nothing to eat, but the one who doesn't have 52 tolas of silver and 7 tolas of gold. In this way, because there is free competition, and in free competition, necessarily there will be people who will go forward and some will remain backward. Free competition. So now who have remained backward, they have to be taken care of by those who have gone ahead. This is the internal management. But the beauty of this Islamic system is that the moral teaching is, don't accept zakah. Work. It's against your dignity. Not like, the right. We have the right to have this social security. It's our right. We have to have it. No. The moral teaching is, earn for yourself. Don't live on this charity. So there goes to be a very big difference between the two. I request to add one point to the political structure, which I forgot. It's not one party system in Islam, multiple party system. But the manifestos of all the parties will be screened, that none of the manifestos contains anything against the injunctions of the Quran and the Sunnah. But there can be different parties, they can have different outlooks on taxation, they can have different outlook on the provincial authority and the central authority, and they can have different these things. Whichever is permissible and mubah, not haram, not proved to be forbidden, they can include. But it has to be screened. Or somebody can go to the court, just like, if a piece of legislation has been passed by the legislature, I have the right to go and knock the door of the higher judiciary that this is against Islam, this is against the Quran and the Sunnah, in the same way.
Israr Ahmed has almost very barely and schematically stated the essentials of 2 very important areas of corporate life, our political system and economic system. And he has studied his normative point of view of course, gleaned from Quran and Sunnah.